let's try to go straight to the problem. And I think that the main problem when it comes to the metaverse is the perception of the metaverse. And this is why I always say that, especially in these early stages of the metaverse, it's extremely important that we do understand what the metaverse is not. And to do that, I played a little joke to my LinkedIn followers a few weeks ago by publishing an article that is very hostile towards the metaverse. And I can share with you after the webinar, of course, but I want to focus on a few aspects of this article that I published. So this is it. You see the first part of the article talks about how this metaverse obsession is fading time after time, and how these CEOs of metaverse startups are now selling their dreams and now selling their failures. And I continue in the article by saying that a lot of these companies, what we call the metazens, are seen as scam artists. And I go on with the article by saying that 1/4 of the metaverse company active today will burn their cash within the next 12 months. And I go on by saying that the share in the metaverse world are pretty much worth nothing today as compared to a crazy amount of money just a couple of years ago. And I go on and on and on. And one of the points that I highlight is the commercial and economical impact of the metaverse by saying, how can the mall that is located just where I live can make more money in just an afternoon of all the metaverse in a month? And I continue by saying that, millions of people are already turning their back to the metaverse. They are frustrated by the experiences, the clunkiness of the experiences, and so forth. And I finished the article with this quote, and I say, by 2030, it will be pretty obvious that the impact of the metaverse in the economy will not be greater than Google+. And so I published this article, and people that knew me were a little puzzled about that. But it was funny to see the comments of people that know nothing about me and know nothing about my take on the metaverse, because a lot of these people were very enthusiastic about this very negative view of the metaverse. So I just took collections of these comments and I just kept reading them for a few weeks. After a couple of weeks, I just explained what the joke was all about. And I said, look, the only thing that I did with this article was to take several articles from the 90s and the early 2000s and change the word internet with the word metaverse. So again, I can send you this article, and again, I didn't change a comma rather than changing the word internet with metaverse. What you're seeing on my screen now are some of the original sources for my articles. So the title comes straight from the New York Times that back in 2001 wrote .com is .gone and the dream with it. And you can find a list of articles talking about the impending doom of the internet. And you see, the internet will never be nirvana, just a passing fad. Millions are giving up on it. These companies are burning cash, exactly what you saw on my article. And it's funny now to look back in retrospect and see that pretty much we're talking about the metaverse today in the exact same way that we were talking about the internet 20, 25 years ago. And this is not coming from low-level journalists. This is coming from the New York Times. This is coming from The Guardian. And this is coming also from a Nobel Prize, Paul Krugman, that said that by 2005, it will be pretty evident that the impact of the internet will not be greater than the fax machines. Now, we all know how the internet pretty much reshaped every single aspect of our lives. So it's always interesting to see the reaction that people have when a new technology is introduced, right? And this is another list of quotes from the late 90s and the early 2000s. You see, you got people like Metcalfe say that the internet will go supernova. No online database will replace your newspaper. That today just makes no sense at all. And you have this that I really like, and it's the time. So again, we're not talking about low-class journalism that says remote shopping, and they're talking about e-commerce, basically, Amazon and so forth, will flop because women like to get out of the house. So you see, it's very interesting, even the choice of the words that we used to use when writing about the internet 25 years ago. And we can stretch it even more and see that in certain occasions, even the exact same words are used, the exact same terms. So what you're seeing on my screen now is an article from 95 saying, it's all hype. I've been on the internet and there's 12 people on there. And what you're seeing at the bottom of my screen is something that came out on DappRadar just last year. And it says pretty much the same thing. It's lonely in the metaverse. The central end has 38 daily active users. So the first thing that we need to understand is no matter the technology, every time a new emerging disruptive technology comes in, the reaction is always mixed at best. Another aspect that is pretty central when we talk about the metaverse is that we probably picked the worst possible name for this technology. And if you're familiar with the term, you maybe already know by now that it comes from a science fiction novel from the 90s. And this science fiction novel is titled Snow Crash. Now, it's funny to see how this novel just became a bestseller on Amazon after Meta rebranded itself. But if you read Snow Crash, and I did because I'm a science fiction aficionado, you will see that this book is all about drugs, economic collapse, and a dystopian future. So I don't understand exactly how somebody can pick this name for a technology that has some incredible implications and some incredible applications and can and probably will completely change the way we work, collaborate, live, interact with each other in the same way that the internet changed all these habits just 20 years ago. But then I started thinking that 20 years ago, something very similar happened with another very dystopian brand, and that was Big Brother. So you're probably familiar with the TV franchise, and when the franchise came out, I had the same doubts. Why are we taking a term from maybe the most dystopian books of all time, 1984 by George Orwell, and we're using this term to describe this very light, funny TV franchise? So maybe there is something like a pattern that I don't see when it comes to dystopian branding. But again, I think that words are important, and I think that the way we talk about the word shapes the word. So I can understand that when we talk about the metaverse, you do have all these dystopian or negative connotations and implications. And I think the main reason is basically semantic. This has nothing to do with the technology itself. This has to do with the fact that this term and the whole narrative around the metaverse comes from dystopian novels. There's another issue with the metaverse, especially when we see the metaverse in general newspaper or blogs or in TV and so forth. And that is the fact that as of today, there's not a single shared accepted definition of the metaverse. So again, this could be a semantic problem even before a technical problem. Now, if you look around, you will see dozens, if not hundreds of different definitions of the metaverse. And you will see that there are some people and some companies pushing more the VR narrative. For example, this is what Zuckerberg is doing. And you will see some other companies pushing the AR or mixed reality narrative of the metaverse. And this is Apple, for example. And it's interesting, and it's even more interesting when you see that a lot of these definitions really exist for commercial purposes. So it makes sense that Zuckerberg is talking more about VR when it comes to the metaverse to a level where you don't really understand why we're not sticking with the virtual reality term and coming up with a new one. But this is understandable because if you look closely, you will also see that Zuckerberg has 90% of the market share for VR headset with Quest. So it's kind of understandable that the definition of the metaverse that comes from Zuckerberg is more about virtual reality. When you see Apple, for example, and what they're doing with Vision Pro, for example, the whole narrative is completely different. They never talk about the metaverse, even though that's pretty much what it is. They talk about spatial computing, but it's all about augmented reality and mixed reality. So all these different nuances sometimes are really there just for commercial purposes. And it's very hard even to get an opinion on something that not even us fully agree on. And I picked some of the most used definitions on this slide that you see on my screen right now. The one that I like the most is this one coming from Alina Peach that says that the metaverse is nothing else but the gradual convergence of the digital and the physical world. And it's pretty much the next iteration of the internet and the next iteration of life. And this is why I'm not a big fan of the term. I use the term metaverse because it's widely accepted. But if we want to be very academic, what we're talking about is just the internet. It's just maybe in a more embodied version of the internet. That is why some people refer to the metaverse as the embodied internet, right? Another quote that I really like, and to me, it kind of explains perfectly the skepticism of a lot of people when it comes to the metaverse, comes from Pallavi Dean. And we spoke once about it, and she said this is, I think it was on an article she wrote, but it really resonated with me because she said something like, I am a recovering metaverse skeptic. And I thought these guys are completely crazy spending all this money on virtual lands and so forth, up until the moment that I realized that I was one of these crazy people because I was buying skins, avatars, virtual countries. And this was already happening with my credit card when my kids were buying stuff on Minecraft, on Roblox, on Fortnite, and so forth. So even for metaverse skeptics or recovering metaverse skeptics, it may totally be that you are already spending money in the metaverse without even knowing about it. Or it could be that to a certain extent, you are using something in your real life that was created, designed, prototyped in the metaverse. And this is why I think that the whole dystopian narrative is doing more bad than good to the metaverse, because at the end of the day, what the metaverse is pretty much just a tool, not unlike the internet today. And another aspect that I think it's worth repeating is the fact that the metaverse per se is not really virtual reality. It's not augmented reality. It's not mixed reality. Like if you want to be academic, it's not even extended reality. When we talk about the metaverse, we talk about reality because it's just another tool that we use on a daily basis. And this is something that, especially if you're older like me and you saw the first internet revolution, you probably remember that our interaction with the web in the early 90s or even in the early 2000s was very different from what it is today. And we used to have a very precise discrepancy between our digital life and our quote unquote real life. To the extent that, if you may remember that in the 90s, it was also very difficult to prove crimes in the internet because everything that was happening in the internet felt like something that was not affecting our real physical life. Now, flash forward to today, and we know that this is no longer the case, right? So I know, for example, that if I write something on LinkedIn, this will have an impact to my company, it will have an impact to my clients and so forth, and vice versa. So we kind of stopped thinking about our digital life and our physical life as two different things. And this is even became more evident after the pandemic. What we're doing now, for example, over Zoom, is not less real than if we were doing this in real life. So just we accept it as part of life, as a tool. As we don't discuss about the technology behind what we're doing now, we don't care if it's Zoom or if it's Teams or if it's Google Meet or whatever. In the next future, the main idea of the metaverse will pretty much be just an afterthought because it will be a part of our life, not unlike our mobile phones or our internet connection. So, and I really like this quote, and I'm sorry, this is mine, this is not coming from anybody else, but I really like it because I think it's pretty easy. In just a few words, you can understand the metaverse. Not VR, not AR, not MR, not XR, just R, where R stands for reality. So if anything, the metaverse is phygital. So it's a continuous correlation between the physical world and the digital world. What you do in the metaverse has an impact in the physical life, and what you do in the physical life has an impact in the metaverse. You can see this on several brands, for example. Some brands come to mind, such as Forever 21, for example. They're doing an amazing job in kind of blurring the lines between metaverse, virtual, and physical reality. For example, what they do is they launch meta collections, meaning that they launch new clothes collections in the metaverse before putting it in real life. And they use the metaverse as a big focus group to understand what will and will not work in real life. So this does have an impact in real life. Or think about what we call industrial metaverse. That's another term that I don't really like, but think about, for example, the use of virtual reality in the automotive industry, or the use of digital twinning in the medical industry, and so forth. So when it comes to these aspects of the metaverse, we are already using it, even if sometimes we don't even know. When we buy a car, it is possible that that car went through a process of security that was tested in a virtual environment. So when we think about crash tests, for example, the first thing that comes to mind is this crash test dummy in a car that crashed against a wall. But this is very expensive to do, and it delays the launch of new cars, and they started doing this in virtual reality. So pretty much they're doing this in the metaverse. You're not really thinking about it when you buy a car. You're not really thinking about it when you go through surgery, for example. You don't really care about the fact if the surgeon was trained in VR, for example. But this is becoming a tool that is just part of day-to-day life. So again, one of the main problems when we talk about the metaverse is this binary approach. This is virtual, this is physical, but the lines are very, very blurred. And the lines are even more blurred for new generations. Well, I don't really like to talk too much about generation. I think it's a little stereotype, but we need to come to the terms that for my kid, playing in Roblox with a friend that is 1,000 miles away and playing with my neighbor doesn't make any difference in terms of the experience itself. So we are moving towards a future where these barriers between virtual, augmented, mixed, physical will make no sense at all. And this is something that a philosopher wrote extensively about, and his name is David Chalmers. I like to quote him pretty often because even though it doesn't work in the metaverse, he's a philosopher, but he kind of understood the essence of the metaverse itself by saying that just in a few generations, the differences between virtual and physical will be so slim that it will be completely pointless even to talk about that. And this is what I call the Roblox generation. Again, if you got a kid between 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, you know that pretty well. And you know that the experience they do have with virtual friends or with physical friends is pretty much the same. It's just a question of grade, of nuances, but it's not a question of the essence of the experience, right? So this is something that we need to take into consideration because otherwise we will continue having this very binary comes to the metaverse, and this is not going anywhere. Another thing that to me it's important when we talk about the metaverse is the fact that the metaverse is, if anything, a convergence of different technologies. It's not a new technology. If you look at the metaverse, there's nothing new about the metaverse. And I like to make an analogy with the first iPhone. Now, if you remember this presentation from 07, you will also remember that the first iPhone was a revolution, but the main idea was to take existing technologies that were working in silos and put them all in one single device. Now you remember that if you're over 40 like me, you will remember that before 07, if you went to a holiday, for example, you had to bring your phone and your laptop and your MP3 player and your digital camera, all these different tech devices. After 07, everything was in one single device. This was the genius idea of Apple, to take all these existing technologies and put them into one single device. And this is exactly what is happening with the metaverse. When we talk about the metaverse, the first implication is always virtual reality, but really when we talk about the metaverse, we're talking about all these different technologies. So anything from computer chips to user privacy to optics, payment frameworks, and so forth. So it's more about many technologies coming together to create the next iteration of life, as my colleague was saying before. And something else that usually is misunderstood is the fact that the metaverse is nothing new. It's for a lot of people, metaverse is something that was invented by Zuckerberg. Now, this is pretty funny because we need to credit Zuckerberg that he pretty much made the world discover the metaverse. But the first VR experiments date back to the 50s of last century. The first real virtual reality machine was created probably in the mid-50s of last century. And year after year, we became a little more immersive in a way, and technology got better. But this is really nothing new. It's just, again, it's a convergence of different technologies. Or, when we talk about minds, for example, events in the metaverse, pretty much everybody knows about like Travis Scott concert in the metaverse. But maybe most people don't remember that the first metaverse concert was back in 2005, and this was Duran Duran in Second Life, right? So again, you see that there are a lot of misconceptions when we talk about the metaverse. And the main ones are, this is not only virtual reality, this is a convergence of technologies, and this is really nothing new. It's just, I don't even think it's an innovation. It's just the normal evolution of the internet, right? And so let's go deeper in what we're talking today, and that is how this will impact the way we work. Now, the metaverse, again, can be applied to a variety of industries and aspects of our daily life, from customer care, for example, to mice, to retail, of course, to travel, and of course, work. So let's take a closer look on how this can and will impact the workspace. So first of all, we have virtual meetings and collaborations. And first of all, this is something that we saw growing quite dramatically during COVID and after COVID. Hosting virtual meetings and conferences can create this sense of immersivity, even for people that cannot travel to a certain destination. And I come from the travel space. My whole career was in hotels and hospitality. So I can tell you that after COVID, for example, a lot of what we call MICE, meeting, incentive, congress, and events, moved to physical events, to virtual events, to immersive events, to hybrid events. So even here, you see that there is always a correlation between the physical world and the virtual or digital world, right? And first of all, this will make the interaction more immersive, and it's way more, the sense of presence is way more impressive than what we can have on a 2D environment like this, for example. And so on top of that, we can see the use of the metaverse. And again, this was something that became pretty mainstream during COVID as a tool of collaborations between different countries or different departments without the need to be in the same room. And of course, this will and is already revolutionizing the way we do work. Just think about, architects or designers during the years of the pandemic, where they could not really interact with each other in real life. And now they could meet in these very immersive spaces and build it together. And there are some aspects that are typical of the metaverse and will solve a lot of the problems that we face on a more 2D environment. So first of all, when we're doing something in 2D, like we're doing now, we got a limited visual context. You see me, but you see me on a flat screen. I see you, but I see you on a flat screen. Well, maybe I don't even see you, I just see your name. Now, if we do this on the metaverse, the immersive spatial video and audio will give a complete different sense of space. Even the audio, if you've ever been to a metaverse, you will know that by now. If I talk and I'm close to you, you will hear my voice just clear and crystal. And if I move away from you, the voice will move away from you as well. It's called spatial audio. It will give this more immersive kind of experience, like if you are there with the rest of the team. Think about the collaboration tools. When we do something on 2D, the collaboration tools that we can use are very limited. It can be screen sharing, what I'm doing now. I can share a document, I can share a chat, but that's pretty much it. Now, if we do this in the metaverse, we got so much more options. We got advanced collaboration tools. So from interactive whiteboarding or object manipulation in real time, for example, I could manipulate an object in front of your eyes, or we could do it together, or 3D content sharing and so forth. Another aspect that is pretty important is whenever we do this in 2D, especially if we're doing this with low quality camera, the opportunities for non-verbal conversation and communication are very, very limited. While when we do that as avatars, the non-verbal communication is enriched. On top of that, we can also get into that meeting with the avatar that we think is more fitting for us, and that is no matter how biologically we're made. And I've been working a lot on that because this is very interesting for marketing purposes. But for example, we find out that people behave differently based on the avatars they choose in a specific metaverse. So as a marketer, for example, we can target people differently based on the way they prefer to represent themselves in a certain day or in a certain metaverse, right? And of course, there is a problem of realism. There is a lack of realism where we do this on a 2D environment, while a meeting space in the metaverse can resemble your physical office, or can it be an environment created for your specific needs. And of course, we go to remote work. So, and again, this is something that we learned with the pandemic. I always say that if anything good, the pandemic made us jump in the future to create a more interactive and dynamic remote work experience. We can be together in a shared office, we can collaborate together on project, we can even create some more casual conversation that we will probably not be able to have on a 2D environment like the one we're working now. And with the rise of remote work, this is of course a huge advantage. And of course, virtual training and onboarding. This is something that is pretty close to my heart because first of all, especially when it comes to interviewing and onboarding people, the metaverse can really put down a lot of discrimination walls. And this is why when you interview somebody in the metaverse, you don't have any kind of bias because the person you are talking to is an avatar, and that avatar is the representation of the feeling of that person in that particular moment, right? And I always like to quote, there is a very interesting book by Malcolm Gladwell, and part of the book is about how Philharmonic Orchestra changed the way they choose the musicians. And they move to blind audition, so they don't really see who is playing, and so they have to know if they want to get this musician in the orchestra just by listening to the way he or she plays. And it's interesting that from the moment they introduced this new blind audition method, the ratio between female musicians and male musicians just became 1-to-1, 50% men, 50% female. And this was completely not the case before blind audition. So one virtuous merit of the metaverse, interviewing people in the metaverse, is that basically we can have unbiased interviews. And of course, we can train people without the need to have these people there in that particular moment. And this could also help people with limited mobility, for example, or people that want to try the job before actually moving to a particular city and so forth in a more dynamic environment like the work environment that we have today, this is really a deus ex machina because it can solve so many different problems. And on top of that, it can also help train on, sometimes it could be like dangerous activities or activities in dangerous places. Think about, just working under the oceans, for example, a high altitude. All of that can be done in the safety of your office or your house on the metaverse. Of course, design and prototyping. So this can and is already used to create 3D models and prototypes with many different people coming together from different parts of the world. So this allowed the teams to visualize and test the new design in a virtual environment, in opposite of just testing it on a piece of paper, right? So this makes it easier to identify flaws, for example, error or mistakes, and make improvements even before that object will go to the market. So this is, and if you know somebody working in the architecture space or the design space, you know already that this is extremely important, and that is why usually architects or interior designers, they have usually a better grasp of the metaverse than other people. Virtual showrooms and sales, and this is great, especially if you want to democratize something that usually is pretty expensive, such as showrooms. In this way, you got customers that can explore products, explore properties in a way that is way more immersive. They can even interact with representatives that could be also virtual, ask questions before making them purchases. And again, we're seeing this, especially in the automotive world, this is becoming pretty mainstream. Of course, you got virtual conference and expos. We talk a little about that at the very beginning of the session, especially after COVID, with a lot of budget for meeting events, incentive and congress that has been cut. More and more companies are moving to hybrid or complete virtual conferences and expos. So this is also great for the environment because this will open opportunities for networking, knowledge sharing without the need for physical travel and all the negative impact that it does have on the environment. And of course, you got even the fun part, the more gaming part, and that's virtual team building activities, for example. So companies can organize team building activities in the metaverse, and this could be anything from escape rooms, it could be a game or adventure, and it can create these bonds between the team and create a more engaging environment. So as you can see, all these different aspects of the metaverse technology can play together. It's already playing together to create a new concept of work that is more in line with how dynamic the workplace has become today. So again, my 2 cents, and if there's something that I want to give you with this presentation, is just try to understand what the metaverse is, but try also to understand what the metaverse is not, because it's not a dystopian nightmare of advertisement. The metaverse is just a tool, and again, it's very likely that since you woke up this morning, you already used the metaverse without even knowing it. And I would like to leave you with the words of probably my favorite science fiction novelist, that is Douglas Adams. Probably you know him because he wrote the Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy. Now, Adams also wrote in another book this very interesting article about our relationship with technology. And he came up with 3 rules, and that is the way we usually interact with technology. It's funny because it's true. And what Douglas Adams says is that everything that is invented since the moment you're born is pretty much normal. It's ordinary, It's just a natural part of the way that the world works. Everything that is invented between you're 15 and 35 is probably new, is exciting, it's revolutionary. You can also create a career out of that. But everything that is created after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. And now this can apply for technology, this can be applied for music, this can be applied for movies and so forth. But the main thing whenever we talk about metaverse or new technology, this can be anything from blockchain or crypto, NFT, decentralization, DAOs, whatever, AI, it's a big topic right now, is make sure that you see the world like you were just born now. So the metaverse, now I hope you understand a little better what it is, what is not, and how this can be applied to the work environment, both to work together, both to have fun together in a more leisure space. So thank you very much.